Hi, Jennifer Jimenez here, and today I am going to be revealing the three powerful ways that confident women quiet their inner critic. And I'm actually going to help reveal where the voice of the inner critic comes from, anyways. Now, if we're meeting for the very first time, I am the co founder of the Brave Thinking Institute and the founder and director of our health and well-being division. And prior to becoming a transformational coach and difference maker, I accomplished my very first dream of becoming a professional dancer. Now, as you can imagine, as a professional dancer, the professional dance world is filled with constantly looking at yourself in the mirror and critically criticizing and or critiquing your form. And so I actually brought a picture of myself. Let me share this with you now. Here is a picture of me as a professional dancer. And this was my before image. You know how oftentimes in fitness you'll see a before and after image. So my before is that I would call myself a body abuser. This picture was actually taken in 1999. I was in my early 20s and I am now 46 at the time of creating this teaching for you. And back then, I was highly critical of my body, to say the least. And I had a lot of negative thoughts running in my mind. I was constantly tearing myself down. I never felt thin enough. I never felt good enough. I never felt fit enough. And I was working tirelessly, constantly starving my body, as well as whipping myself into shape and trying to manipulate my natural way that my body wanted me to be to try to fit the dance world's view of what a professional dancer looked like. And I had some what are called old paradigm common hour limiting beliefs. So I'm going to share what these negative thoughts were that were constantly running in my mind that my inner critic was saying. And then I'm going to help reveal where I believe these words or these limiting beliefs came from, and potentially reveal with you where your inner critic comes from. And then we're going to be talking about what highly confident women do, the three things that highly confident women do to quiet the inner critic and to skyrocket their confidence and their divine radiance. So here we go. The first negative thought was no pain, no gain. If I wasn't working my butt off or working my tail off, I grew up, in the early 2000s when Jane Fonda was really popular, and it was burn off that fat and get those buns of steel. And, it was very much a no pain, no gain mentality. It was definitely all work and no rest. I was constantly telling myself not to feel tired and to push through the pain and to, rest is for the weak. Those kinds of thoughts were going through my mind. I was also holding the belief that I needed to mold and whip myself into shape, that the sort of natural curviness of my body and voluptuousness of my body was not acceptable. I would often hear, aren't dancers thin? And only thin people can wear those clothes. And I was actually, when I look back at pictures, I was quite lean and very thin, but for whatever reason, the messages I was receiving, I'd never felt thin enough. So when I would look at myself in the mirror, I would think thoughts like, you're too fat, you need to lose weight. I would look at the scale, and the number on the scale would determine whether I had a good day or bad day. And I'm wondering if you can relate. I would resist and suppress my body's messages to rest. I would just push through and keep working hard. And I also judged my self-worth by cultural standards of attractiveness. So again, I would look at magazines or commercials or even mannequins at the time. This is back in the day when they didn't have any other kind of a mannequin than like a Barbie type mannequin. So I was looking at all of those and seeing that, not seeing myself necessarily match or measure up. And I was feeling really negative about that. I felt my body was flawed. I felt like I wasn't enough. And how we do anything is actually how we do everything. And early in my early 20s, right about 24, I'd been married already for a few years. I met my husband very young, and we wanted to have a family, and I got pregnant with my beautiful first child. Now, if you remember, I had this very abusive relationship with my body. Now, I didn't become an abusive mother. That's not what I'm alluding to. But my birth was not the kind of all natural, easy, flowy birth that I wanted it to be. Because I was in resistance to my body, because I was controlling and struggle and in fear around food and fitness in my body, that created a 50-hour labor. Yes, that says 50. It was definitely a traumatic labor and not the kind of beautiful, healthy, all natural labor that I wanted. So that created a lot of confusion for me. Here I was at the peak of fitness, this beautiful professional dancer who claims and feels that she has this great relationship with her body, because at the time I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know there was another way. And yet I had this very, what felt like a failure result in this birth. And the beautiful thing is, oftentimes our failures turn into the doorways for our greatest successes. Or some people might say our messes become our deeper message. Now, I didn't know it yet, but that 50-hour labor was the doorway that opened up a whole new world for me, a world where I began to discover the mind, body, spirit connection. I began to recognize what an abusive relationship I had with my body, and that my inner critic played a very powerful role in beating myself up all the time. And I realized that I needed to have a paradigm shift. It was time to grow and to heal and to create life and results in a new way. And so I became a trained and certified mind body expert in my endeavors and a transformational life coach. I read every book I could find on the mind body connection. I went to every training and certification I could get my hands on. And then I also just began to piece these things together, because not everything I've discovered or learned I could learn from someone else. A lot of this was also self-healing and self-growth and transformation. And I eventually began to teach and speak and coach and guide and lead others in transforming themselves, because I had seen a healing and transformation in myself and my body. I quieted the inner critic and unlocked and unleashed greater self-confidence and greater love. So I began to share the stage with beautiful souls like Deepak Chopra and Bruce Lipton and Marianne Williamson. I began to help other women all over the world who also had low self-esteem, or a overly highly active inner critic, or that just simply wanted to create a more loving relationship with themselves to really be able to give of their gifts and talents in this world. And then those products and programs were featured on Fox News and ABC, Self, Shape, USA, Oxygen, and many more. And I found conscious dance, and I created my own modality called Transcendance, which is to merge my passion for personal development, the mind body practices, spiritual psychology, somatics, energy healing, and conscious dance to help us transcend limiting beliefs and paradigms and live a vibrantly healthy life that we love living. And I was able to, through many, many years of mind, body, spirit, many years of practicing conscious dance and rewiring my inner critic to be more of an inner cheerleader, I now believe that I am a living, breathing expression of divine spirit, and my body is a sacred temple. I believe that pleasure, movement, fitness, and well-being and vitality is my natural birthright. I believe that listening to my body's inner wisdom and nourishing my body creates optimal well-being. And as I love and trust my body, it finds and maintains a healthy size and shape. And that my body is the perfect vehicle to bring forth my life's purpose and mission. There's a picture of me in my before, and then a picture of me practicing conscious dance as a body lover. So how do you go from being a body abuser to a body lover? There are three powerful clues or keys or secrets that highly successful women practice to quiet the inner critic and unleash unshakable self-confidence. So the first is to recognize and hear when the inner critic is speaking. What we call it here at Brave Thinking Institute, and if you didn't know, we are the premier institute for transformational coaching. Brave thinking tool number one is to notice what you're noticing. And as I began to wake up to these principles and start applying them even more deeply, particularly in the area of self-image, body image, and self-confidence, I realized that I was speaking to myself in ways that I would never allow anyone to speak to my daughter, or I would never allow anybody to speak to my best friend. And so by noticing what we're noticing, we can begin to ask ourselves, if I was my own best friend, how would I speak to myself? How would I encourage myself? How would I pump myself up? How would I help myself grow if I want to improve? And little by little, you can begin to reprogram those thoughts. Now, the question that we're also unpacking here is, where does this inner critic come from anyways? Why is this inner critic so overly negative and critical and tearing us down? So let's take this one level deeper. The inner critic is a programming that begins very early on in life. Oftentimes, how we view ourselves or how we speak to ourselves is just simply a playback loop. Oftentimes, when I begin to work with clients now that I'm coaching and they tell me, I have them write down what the voice of the inner critic is saying. And then I ask them, does this sound like anyone you know, or anyone you grew up with, or any one of your teachers or coaches or caregivers that you had in your childhood or teenage years? And all too often, it goes back to an overly critical caregiver or parent or coach or industry like gymnastics or dance or these kinds of industries that are very and have been for many years, or even ice skating. There's quite a bit of body abuse and or negative body images that get installed by coaches, by parents, by teachers, by society, magazines that we read, commercials that we watch. And so as we're growing up, the mind is like a sponge. It just receives, it can't edit. If you have a parent that says you're too fat, you got the chubby genes, you got the big genes, you're never going to be able to be fit, and no matter what your body size, or maybe you receive messages of being too skinny and like a skeleton, or whatever the messages were, just know that you can begin to pull those weeds and you can begin to plant new seeds of beautiful thoughts and beautiful beliefs about your body, about yourself, about your beauty, so that you can skyrocket your self-confidence. So the first step is noticing what you're noticing, recognizing that this feedback loop and these negative thoughts probably aren't coming from the truth of your being or your higher self. It's coming from a programmed human self. Step two is to interrupt the voice and begin to install a loving voice like the voice of a best friend. And step three is to then begin to say more positive, empowering affirmations or words of love or words of kindness. And then you simply rinse and repeat. Now, if you would like some support in overriding your overly critical inner critic and beginning to install even more unshakable self-confidence, I have a free gift for you. It's called the Confidence Kit. There's a link right here that you can click to download that confidence kit. And if you like this video, please go ahead and like it. Go ahead and make some comments in the space below. Share us how you quiet that inner critic and how you are able to release even more confidence, or maybe who you think some of the voices are in your own mind that might be related to your inner critic. Where did some of these messages come to you? And know that no matter how long it's been or how negative those messages were, you absolutely can begin the process of reprogramming them today. And go ahead and subscribe to this video because we have more tips coming out every single week. I look forward to supporting you on your journey of increasing your self-confidence and creating vibrant health and well-being, as well as living a life you absolutely love. And we do this through dream building and brave thinking. So until next time, think bravely.